How do you make samples or loops that actually have a vibe, and how do you send them out to other producers? I am Ekid, music producer, sound designer, and also sample maker from Germany, and in this video I will show you all my tricks and tips that I use while making samples. So let's jump right in. What I do first for most of my samples is try to think of a vibe or a reference, what I want it to sound like or what vibe it should have. I first think about what I want it to sound like in my head. We are gonna jump in this project. We're gonna look at the different tracks and I will explain to you what I did there. The first thing that I do when I open a session is try to get down the first melody, the first chords as quickly as possible. For example, with this one, I have recorded this from my analog synthesizer right there. As you can hear, this is a pretty basic sound and a pretty basic melody, but I just want to have one track at the beginning to set the vibe and work from there. And I also try to not change this track at all. This is like my anchor point and I'm gonna work from there. And this is also what I mean with setting the vibe. Once we have this track down, the vibe is clear for the first bit and we can work from there. So our next sound is pretty much the opposite. It's not soft, it's distorted and it's faster. And as soon as you have this basic foundation for the sample, you can try to add some weird things. For example, this sound. And as you can see, this weird sound is panned to the right. And this alone would not be enough for a sample or a loop for me, but rather for a starter. So if I want to make a starter out of that, I would export it now. But for sample, I always like to have some low end. And that's why we add a bass sound. And I like to have different bass sounds for different parts of the sample, but we will get to this arranging stuff later. We have filled out, I think, most of the frequency spectrum. And that's also what I like to do if I want to check if the sample is good like it is or if I should change something. I first try to look at how much of the frequency spectrum is already filled out. So we can use some EQ or analyzer. We could use a bit more low end, but as I said, we'll use a different bass in the other parts, so that will take care of itself. And to get a bit of a rhythmic feeling in the sample, I often like to add a drum loop to that. Record it with my synthesizer. Yeah. EQ'd it a bit. And this is also the point where you can check if the sample works good with drums on it already. So I told you about different parts of the sample. And you can already see that here. And my workflow most of the times is I add stuff, add even more stuff. Then I try to remove at least 10-20% from them. And I try to see which single tracks work well together and build some groups. And when I make samples with multiple parts, most of the time I do 2 or 3 parts, then I like to change the energy. So one part of the sample could be used in a hook and another part could be used in a verse or a break or something like that. Try to change the energy by rearranging and using other sounds. And for me, energy in music doesn't only come down to using many different tracks or layering thousands of elements on top of each other, but from just using different sounds. So sound selection is key here. And I also like to use a lot of breaks to get more energy, to like have the listener breathe for a second and then get the energy come back. So what we have here are some little ear candy or texture sounds. A lot of echo on there. This one is much higher than another sound. So as you can hear, I like to add some unexpected sounds that are not like the typical melody, but more like little accents, little ear candy that are just in there. And what's also great is adding some sort of natural recording or some texture. For example, I have this wildlife recording out of a forest or something. And I put a compressor on there and set the switch right there to expand. And the input for this is just this group with all these accent sounds, so that this recording is only audible if some of these other textures are playing, and as promised, the other type of bass sound. And then some sort of crazy effect sounds. This one is really spooky. And there are so many different types of samples that you can make. This is really just a preference that I have for making this type of samples. For example, for swag samples or R&B samples, I would probably go a bit of a different route, but keep some of those key aspects. On my master chain, I don't have much, but I always have a saturator. In Ableton, I like this soft sine setting. I always have a shifter to check for different pitches if they sound better or worse. And lastly, some sort of limiter and exciter, the God particle. I can recommend it. It has a limiter, a little EQ, and on some samples, if I want them to be really loud and just have a quick solution, I put ozone on there, just a trap preset, and turn the loudness up a bit. And if you export your sample, check if there's an option to normalize it to peak. In Ableton is just normalize, so it's the loudest it can possibly be. Okay, now you made your sample. After exporting some of your samples, you might wonder how you could organize them. I think everyone does this in a little bit of a different way, but most popular categories are something like dark samples, hard samples, maybe nostalgic. For me, my sample folder looks like this, but I also sometimes change some of the categories up or add another category. So I have this dark hard, I have chill, nostalgic, emotional, I have swag, funky for those swag samples. This category right here is my newest category. As you can see, there's not that much in here, but I tried to split my nostalgic category a bit more up into high energy and low energy, and this is the more high energy one. And I have this other/experimental folder where I just put the things that don't fit in any of the other categories. For sending them out, you could just use your normal mail provider and put everyone in the BCC so they don't all see each other's email address. But I personally use a browser extension that tracks if somebody has opened the email or not, a bit more clarity there. And what I'm trying out right now is sorting my samples by using specific tags for them. So they don't have to be all in one folder, but rather have tags in their name, which can then later be sorted out by using the search function. And the big advantage of that is that you don't have many subfolders. For example, if you want to have dark samples in general, then dark synth, dark piano, dark flute samples, you would normally have a dark folder and maybe some subfolders. But with tags, you could just put those tags in the name of the sample itself. But doing this manually is pretty exhausting and it takes a long time. So I got an idea to make this easier for all producers. So I made a little website primarily for myself in which you can import your samples and you can add text to them, you can listen to them, you can check if the BPM, if the key is right, and then you can export them all in one zipped package and have all those samples normalized if you want them. And as I said, I made it primarily for myself, but then I showed it to some producer colleagues and they all said they want to use it as well. So I may be publishing it, and that's why you can't see the domain and the name right now, because I have to think of something first. I will show it to you now on desktop. So let's look at it on the big screen here. I will just go in my Dropbox and put in some of my recent samples. I drag the whole folder in here and it scans all the files. I have waves and MP3s here, and it puts them together. So it recognizes that they have the same name and puts them as one file. You can change the key, the BPM, and what you can also do is add those tags. So let's do that. Let's listen to the sample first. Okay, for me this is chill, ambient, maybe dreamy, and I just press those keys on the keyboard that are shown here. For example, there's a 4, 5, and a 7. So I press those. As you can see, here's the preview for the new file name, and the tags get added in the beginning of the file. So when you're finished with one sample, you can just press enter and arrow down to go to the next. And as I told you earlier, you can change the tags here freely and save them. And when you are finished, you can just export the zip. It will warn you if you haven't edited all the files. What you can do here is set the final name for the zip folder, but you can also just change that afterwards. And what you can also do is normalize all the samples so they are all at the peak of the loudness. And I tried some experimental feature here where you can pitch shift, but it doesn't work that well in the browser right now. So you have to imagine all this processing here is not on any server, but it's right there in your browser. So your files don't get uploaded anywhere. And that's also the reason why it's difficult, at least for my knowledge, to add some external pitch shifter to the site. If you know how that works, let me know in the comments down below. But for now, I would just not use the pitch shifter, and you can export by pressing E. In my experience, it's around 2 to 5 seconds per sample that you rename. So as I said, I made this tool primarily for myself and maybe some producer friends, but I was bored for a day, so I made it look pretty cool, and now I'm thinking about sharing it. So let me know in the comments below if you would like something like this tool, if it could help you, and if enough people are interested and I'm gonna publish the tool, you will be the first to know if you are subscribed to the channel, so consider that. And as you can see, it now asked me if I want to allow a download. I press allow and I get a zip folder which is named nicely. And as you can see, the 2 samples that we tagged are nicely renamed and can be sent out. I hope this video was helpful to you and see you guys next week.